Excellent question. Really, I think there's no cookie cutter approach. I think my own personal view and experience has been your degrees are pieces of paper that tell other people you can think on your feet and think critically to assess issues. For some professions, you need that particular expertise that you gain through university or college. But in many others, it's the transferable skills that make a difference. So yes, you could certainly be a scientist in fishery science, biology, things like that. You could be an economist, someone that went through business, accounting, whatever. There are so many different economic fields that could be applied to fisheries, and it all depends on where you want to work within the industry. Is it in the operations? Is it sales? Is it management? It really all depends. So much like many sectors of the Canadian economy, we are export oriented. And so our key markets are the US, which varies from 60 to 70%, because there's always some annual fluctuations. China is actually our second largest market, ranging in recent years 13 to 17%. And then the EU as a bloc is our next highest at about 3 or 4%. Japan is about 3%, but there's growing markets in the rest of Asia as well. That I think that's where we see a lot of opportunity in the years to come. That's a very good question. That is an issue that is certainly alive and well in the sector today. There's a lot. I guess one of the first things that often gets unrecognized is there's a lot of partnership and engagement already between non-Indigenous license holders and operators and Indigenous communities, where they're already partnering, and that was without any government intervention. Obviously, for Canada, we have a checkered past with our Indigenous communities. And the government and Canadians as a whole want to reconcile that past. The government wants to see increased Indigenous participation in the sector. I think one of the challenges is when all of our fisheries or access to our fisheries is fully allocated, giving more to one means you have to take away from someone else. And how do you do that? And so that's where the challenges lie. And how do you do that in an open and transparent and fair manner? Those discussions continue to happen daily. I guess I should start by acknowledging that we do have some commercial freshwater fisheries, mostly in the Great Lakes in Ontario and also farther north in Manitoba as well as in Saskatchewan. I don't know how much in Alberta. Certainly there's recreational fishing across the country. I think, for many Canadians, most of us, we live too far away from the ocean. So we don't understand all the complexities of how do we as a society and certainly as our government manages our fish resources and our ocean ecosystem. I spent 15 years in the forest industry, and trying to manage our forests, I thought that was complicated enough, and the trees don't move. I mean, yes, you have to manage for all the wildlife that lives in the forest, but at least the trees don't move. The fish, they swim around, they don't care about dotted lines on a map. And so I think one of the challenges is that, politics can get in the way where certain decisions are communicated in sound bites and people don't understand the complexities. And they might say, oh, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, but we don't understand or don't have an opportunity to communicate about the complexities or the consequences of, shutting down a fishery. Now, nobody wants to shut down a fishery anytime, but if it is certainly under threat, perhaps because of climate change and, our ocean temperatures are rising, there's ocean acidification. So the fooding behavior, the migration patterns of individual fish stocks is changing. And so that may create more stress outside of the fishing effort. And so there's a lot of things that Canadians don't understand. And it'd be great if we did know more, but I think that's an unrealistic expectation as well. So I think that was a long answer. So no, your memory's good. That was a high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy. So it's like a global think tank of world leaders that made that conclusion. And a lot of it is based on increasing the mariculture. So not just growing like farming fish, but also seafood and like seaweed and other plants, not just animal proteins. And so I think that's going to be where the biggest growth opportunity is within that projection. For wild capture fisheries, I think there are some hotspots where unfortunately there is illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing and also overfishing. And so that's not sustainable. That needs to stop. That needs to be corrected. And if we did that, then those stocks would grow over time and allow us to actually harvest more. In Canada, we manage our fish stocks quite well. We've got a robust regulatory regime, and our industry is one of the leaders in the world in the adoption of third-party independent certification. But some of our fish stocks are under threat from climate change, and some of those threats will probably intensify in the decades to come. So we need to manage them closely. We also need to conduct fishery science so that we have the data to inform our decision making. And that's one of the challenges we have right now with our government, that it hasn't been able to keep up completely in recent years. And we know that the science is getting more complicated because of climate change. So that means it's going to take more effort, more resources. And across government, it's going to be stretched, because we just got out of a pandemic, tremendous overspending to keep people employed and provide for them, which, we had to do. But it also means some austerity times ahead across government, and that's going to squeeze all departments. So it's going to be a huge challenge. It is a good question. For FCC, because our membership is really the coastal areas, we don't have a formal position on freshwater resources. Obviously, we want to make sure that they are maintained. And I know from being in the public policy space nationally that there has been public debates at various times in the past of, should we export fresh water to the US? And I think, personally, I think that's a dangerous prospect because it might be something that a tap you can't turn off. So yeah, we need to be careful of how we manage our fresh water. And also, there's a lot of communities that rely on fresh water for drinking, and we have too many boil water advisories in largely rural and remote communities. including primarily indigenous communities. Well, as I said, we have a robust regulatory regime. There's a lot of regulations and processes that go into how we manage our resources and what we call in the industry fishing effort. So how many boats are in the water and things like that. A lot of jurisdictions, particularly in the developing world, don't have the resources to develop those types of regulations, or if they have them, do they have enough resources to enforce them? And so I think that's what sets us apart from, part of the developing world. Many of our compatriots in the developed world, like the US or Europe, they would have similar regimes. They might have some variances in the details, but I think there's a lot of good practices that have been developed and certainly promoted and communicated through the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. And they do have a code of conduct that's been out there for 25 years. And so if more countries were able to put that in place and effectively manage it, I think we'd be better off in the world. But it's easier said than done, certainly from my seat. Facts. Normally, I would have some that come right off the top of my head, but they're escaping me at the moment. But certainly, so one of the key differentiators is omega-3s, which helps in maintaining brain health and things like that. There's other nutrients and minerals that are very high in fish and seafood that you can't get to the same degree in some animal proteins or some vegetables. So I think just eating, Health Canada recommends 2 servings per week. And here's a fun fact that just came to me. So Health Canada recommends 2 servings per week, and Canadians average just over half of that, just over 1 serving per week. And we actually surveyed or did some market research to find out why Canadians eat fish and seafood the way they do and why they don't buy more. And perceived cost is the primary driver or barrier. And what is perceived cost? It's, well, the absolute cost, but it's also Canadians aren't that familiar with seafood. We're like very conservative culture when it comes to seafood. Other cultures, they'll eat a whole shrimp or langoustine, shell and all, basically, or brain and stuff like that. No, we want the fish filleted. We don't want the whole fish on the plate and things like that. So, what we're trying to do is communicate how in our domestic marketing campaign, how easy it is to swap our other proteins and insert fish and seafood in our meal rotation. So for pasta, throw in some scallops or some shrimp or something like that. Instead of beef tacos, have fish tacos, and you could put in tuna or cod or halibut, haddock, whatever. There's plenty of recipes on our website, chooseseafood.ca. I wish I had a banner to put that up there. And but chooseseafood.ca, tons of recipes that if you like fish to begin with, your mouth will be watering by the time you leave the website. The easy answer is very important. Our industry, we do have an aging workforce. The average age is like pretty near 60. And a lot of companies across the country are trying to attract new employees. We've got a vacancy rate of 20-25%. So we're investing in automation not to replace jobs, but to replace empty jobs that we can't fill. And so that will be an ongoing thing. We just entered a partnership with an organization called Food Processing Skills Canada, and they have a number of programs aimed at creating more awareness around the job opportunities in food processing, and including fish and seafood. And so, some of those programs are aimed at the companies to help them recruit new employees, but some of it might be to just create more general awareness among whether it be young Canadians or new Canadians to enter the seafood industry. And I think one of the challenges we have as well is we operate mostly in smaller coastal communities. Not everybody wants to live there, but you can have a great quality of life in a small community, and you're right by the ocean. If you love nature, that's a huge attribute. Interesting question. There are some good similarities because sustainability is paramount for both sectors, right? I mean, if we're not responsible stewards of our natural resources, particularly renewable resources, then we're just jeopardizing our future viability and prosperity. So in forestry, a lot of effort went into forest management to make sure the forests were nice and healthy for generations to come. In fisheries, we have to do the exact same. It's just that it's more complex because the fish swim around. And, you can't see the fish as well. So when you're trying to catch certain species, if they swim with other species, then that non-target species, what we call, is bycatch. And we try and minimize that. So you have to figure out when are they most likely not to swim together, so you can catch only the target species. And can you configure the net in a way that will only catch the target species and let the other ones escape somehow? There's some really interesting innovations happening with lighting technology to install that on the nets so that it attracts the target species and deters the non-target species and things like that. So we're improving that way. The other added complexity moving from forestry to fisheries is food safety aspect, because we don't eat trees. And so that was something new that I had to get my head around. But it was a steep learning curve, but the people in the industry were great and helped me out and got me up to speed pretty quick. But I'm still learning, right? I've been in the industry 5.5 years, and I'm always learning every day. I was hoping someone would ask about that. So when I first started at FCC, my American counterpart came up to visit and said, Paul, we've got this Future Leaders program. We need to partner together to bring it to Canada. And I think didn't even take 5 minutes to sell me on it. And so then I worked on it, took about a year to get it off the ground. We started in 2019. And I participated in the program the first year because I'm not necessarily young, but I was new to the sector. And so I think the best benefits, as I said in the presentation, are the exposure to different things along the supply chain that people don't see in their day-to-day responsibilities of their job. And then they get to network with their peers and leaders across the sector, both on the wild capture and aquaculture, because the program is intended for both sides of the sector. In terms of the eligibility, you have to work in the industry, and your employer, the company, pays for your tuition, pays for your travel costs and incidentals to participate. But we take a pretty broad definition or interpretation of the supply chain. So you could work in government, You could certainly work in the industry. You could work in an environmental group related to the fisheries, and we'd likely take you in and let you participate in the program. But it is currently it's intended for people that already work in the industry, and you don't have to be young. We say future leaders because it could be people that have been in the industry for 10, 20 years, but now they're starting to elevate in their roles, and the companies want to invest in their future and allow them to participate. So our age demographic for the program is, I think we might have had someone less than 30, and we've certainly had someone over 50, and everything in between. Going forward, I think it's climate change, because it's the hardest one for us to address. In terms of mitigation, I'm afraid we're past the point of no return. Globally, there just doesn't seem to have been enough political will to address this global problem with enough seriousness. Certainly in Canada, I've been working on climate policies to varying degrees for over 20 years. And we've had a lot of starts and stops. And so it's frustrating, quite frankly, to see us not farther along in the issue. So in the industry, we tend to look more at the adaptation side of things. We're already seeing impacts in our ocean. As I said, ocean acidification, which makes the shell of shellfish weaker and can affect the quality of the meat. We're not seeing, significant impacts that way yet, but we know it's coming. Water temperature, as I said, changes the migration patterns of different species. And so they might move out of one management area to another. And how does that affect resource allocation? Because it'll create winners and losers, things like that. And ultimately, it will affect the viability of certain fish stocks, unfortunately, or certainly in local populations. Right now, we're actually seeing some positive benefits where certain fish species, and lobster, I think, is one prime example, where it is, almost, I think it's the best it's ever been. And it's also a very valuable stock. And, I think our exports are about $3 billion a year. And so that's a lot of money. Snow crab is doing quite well as well. Another, valuable product. So you get the good and the bad. I think the bad's going to be growing in intensity in the decades to come. And we need to kind of change the way we look at fishery science to some degree over the years to come, and how we do that collectively and transparently. I think will build confidence in how it's done or erode confidence in how it's done. And it means we have to be transparent and have real engagement between the industry and government.
That's a super great answer. I don't want to take up too much of your afternoon here. I know you have a lot of places to be, but I wanted to thank you so much for your time today. Just before we let you go, is there any last minute topics, questions, comments that we haven't covered?
I think really just, don't be afraid to look for information about the issues, and, learn every day. So, when you're done school, that's not the end of the learning process. Eat seafood because it's healthy, tastes great. Eat Canadian seafood because it's sustainable and it's healthy and it tastes great. Look for Canadian products in the grocery store, and don't be shy in, learning how to cook it. Be creative. It's not as hard as it looks, and enjoy it.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Such great answers to all of our questions today. We really appreciate all of your time in preparing that for this and joining us today. I know I've got a lot of takeaways for sure on like the economic benefits of fisheries. I had no idea. So that's just fantastic. I'm super, super grateful.
Yes, it's been my pleasure. And I invite people to visit our website. The other thing I forgot about in terms of choosing Canadian seafood, and that we have a consumer guide as well to help people, because I mentioned that we don't have great familiarity with seafood. So the consumer's guide is to provide helpful information to help you learn about portion sizes and how to store it, prepare it, and things like that.
Awesome.
And then there's plenty of other information on our website about some of the issues that we're dealing with as well.
Well, we'll definitely have to go check that out. That's a great resource.
Yeah. And also Future Leaders Canada, the program information is there as well.
Super. Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you to everybody for tuning in. Make sure to join us next week for Randy Fournier from PRT. Otherwise, I'll let you go, but thank you so, so much for your time.
All right. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You as well. Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.